Utilized in Pope Sixtus V's urban renewal for Rome, the philosophy of governance or principles of city planning were not only used to reimagine Rome in the 16th century, but were also applied to the notion of American town planning in the 18th century. During the Renaissance period, the church in Rome gained more power, and it became necessary to position Rome as a cultural and religious center of the world. Streets were straightened and used as central axes for organization, and building height restrictions were instituted to maintain the physical dominance of churches in the landscape. Other improvements were also made that began to organize city spaces, such as the Michelangelo's masterpiece of urban design at the Piazza Campidoglio and the broad street known originally as Via Pia, known today as Via Settembre.
During the Counter-Reformation, Pope Sixtus V wanted to reinvigorate the city of Rome and create a place suitable to be the center of the Christian world. He overlaid an organizational structure for circulation routes that connected major spaces to one another. This created a new way of thinking about the city, articulating circulations as the primary organizational structure. As a result, his plan for the urban renewal of Rome was born. Sixtus V used formal logic and the properties of stage sets to design new cities, cleaning up spaces and implementing the new radical notion of perspective. This visual aid of perspective and directionality of elements in a city privileged movement through space as an experiential sequence, rather than interactions with individual, static elements in space. He used circulation as an organizational structure to connect pieces around the city to one another. For example, he located 4 obelisks around the city to create clear visual connections between them, as well as clear paths of movement from one to the next. In addition to the use of perspective, Sixtus V used straight lines, creating long straight roads and trivials, or plazas, where 3 major paths intersected.
An example of a piece of urban infrastructure that Sixtus V reimagined within the city was the Piazza del Popolo. With a large focus on creating a grand entry space and delineating a clear threshold, this piazza was populated with 2 obelisks centered between twin churches. The obelisks gave rise to the prominence of 3 intersecting streets connecting to the bank of the Tiber River. Deriving from stage set design, this piazza is conflated with the idea of theater and spectacle, creating a space that is paradisical in nature. Further evidence of Pope Sixtus V's city planning ideals were seen in the construction of the Spanish Steps, which created a direct mode of circulation from the obelisk to the terminus of major streets, Via Pia and Santa Maria Maggiore.
Now fast forward to the 18th century. Europeans began shaping the way American towns were being planned in philosophical terms of governance. As seen in Savannah, Georgia, and Washington, D.C., individuals with military backgrounds were creating the urban fabric to represent a military logic. In other words, these cities began to represent layouts of military campuses, which allowed authorities to organize and govern the public in an authoritative sense.
In 1736, James Oglethorpe established the city of Savannah, Georgia. The city's plan reflects political and organizational considerations of the day. Streets and building lots are organized around a central open space or square. There are 2 trussed lots to the left and right side of the square. Above and below the strip are tithings. This entire unit is called a ward and then copied to create the rest of the urban fabric. The regularity of these lots controlled the size and rhythm of development in the 3rd dimension to create a visually diverse and humanly scaled city.
In 1791, Washington, D.C. was designed by Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, a French architect and military engineer. L'Enfant focused on the 2 highest ridges of the landscape for the 2 centers of government. From this symbolic division, he radiated a dynamic web of diagonal avenues overlaid with a rational grid of streets. L'Enfant envisioned a series of classically styled buildings to convey the same message as the plan, a government aggressively radiating into the future, yet grounded with stable roots in the past.
So, while the Roman urban renewal and American town planning eras differ in time periods, they share the role that the philosophical idea of governance has in design. These cities had figureheads design the urban fabric in ways to express the power and importance of their culture and landscape.